Hi, this is Matthew Tate from Fork in the Road YouTube channel, your channel for transformation. I'm making this video today because I've recently read an amazing book by Brendon Buchard. This book is called High Performance Habits. What I didn't realize when I read this, I read this because I was trying to lift my game in numerous areas in life. But what I realized is that inside here, there's actually tips for managing many things in your life. In particular, I got some tips. One I wanted to share with you today, which is why I'm making this video. One tip was about anxiety and how to manage that. But then I realized that this particular tip would be perfect for in the other area I'm interested in, which is adoption and adoptees and managing your state, managing yourself, getting to know yourself, resolving things and moving on. Let me share this philosophy inside this book, the Brendon Buchard book. Now, I'm not paid for this. This is just because it's a great technique and I've been applying it for myself. So what is this technique? Well, why am I making this video? To share this release technique that's inside the Brendon Buchard book. The release technique is very basic. It's 2 basic steps. And he introduces the idea of transitions. Transitions in your day, transitions in your life, or transitions in changing from one situation to the next. And I found this particularly useful in 2 areas of anxiety, men's anxiety, mental health, that sort of thing, and also adoption. In particular, adoptees who are looking to transition into a new phase of their life, perhaps searching for family, that sort of thing. This technique's very basic. The transition is from one situation to the next, where you go from the simple example Brendon brings up is you're going to sleep and you wake up in the morning. So that's a transition. Simple version of a transition from sleeping to awake and into action. And what do you do with that next moment? Another transition might be when you're at home getting ready and and then you transition to getting to work in the car. Now you're driving. Now you're in a different state. That's a transition. That's a simple transition. The next transition might be when you're in the car, you've been driving to work, and now you've got to transition into the office or your workplace. And in that workplace, you now have to perform. You've gone from driving, maybe thinking about your shopping and thinking about what's going on with the kids and your wife, your husband, or whoever. And then you get to this place over here where now you have to perform. Now you're at work. Now you've got actions that are expected. It's a transition. What I love in this book, he gives one really good example of what a transition is. Then we can apply the technique. And he gives an example of an executive he was coaching. And he was coaching this executive who just wasn't present at home. He was a CEO or someone at the top of a company. And he had issues in the household. And so he made a decision to apply this technique, transitioning of release, and he decided to show up differently for his family, because the transition he was encountering was he's this high-flying CEO and now he's got to be home and be husband and dad. And so that transition, we bring the tension with us from the CEO role into the day. And so the question I would ask you is, where do you bring the tension from one situation into the next, ruining that moment in the next situation? That's probably the best example I can come up with in the short term, is that you bring the tension of work into your home. And you haven't had that release of the tension, and you haven't decided to show up at home. And that's what the release technique will do. This release technique is very basic, very simple. All you do is, as you're about to transition, before you do transition, that you do these things. Let me now take you through the transition release technique. So in the book, it says you sit there, you breathe in deeply. Let's set the scene first. You've driven home from work, you're in the driveway, and you're sitting there. You've got a lot of things, stress and tension from your day, from your situation. Anxieties from work, different situations that are coming up. And you're possibly going to bring all of that into the house. You're going to bring that into the house and not be present. You're going to be somewhere else. And that's what anxiety is. It's you're not in the room. You're somewhere else. That's the power of this technique. So that's the scene. You're in the car. You've driven home from work. You're in the driveway. Give yourself a few moments. And you can do this in just a few seconds. Give yourself a few moments. And focus. And breathe deeply. And think about the things that are annoying you in your day about the work day you just had. Breathing in deeply. And say the word release. Think about that specific problem. Release. Closing your mind and breathing in. And just give yourself maybe 30 seconds. Release. Let it go. You can play with the words, whatever they are for you. Let go of what was. You'll go back and you'll deal with it tomorrow. But for now, let it go. So that's step one of the 2 steps. You've got to let go of what's just happened in your day. Not bring it into the house. Now step 2 is to set the intention. Choosing 3 aspirational words that will show up for your next situation. What are 3 aspirational words? So in the context of the CEO who's letting go of his tension of the day and he's now coming to his wife and children, what could he do? The very first thing he could do is he could say, all right, what are 3 things I need? 3 words that would sum up who I need to be when I walk in the door to my wife. It really should start with your wife or your husband or your partner or your significant other. And so who do I want to be? And so walk in that door with those 3 words and sit for a moment and really picture the 3 words. Now, if you've done the work beforehand, you already have the 3 words. But once you've established them for that situation, you can then show up and be present. And so perhaps for the wife example, and the husband-wife situation, perhaps the example might be that the husband walks in the door and he's got 3 words that might be, I want to be inquisitive about my wife's day. So I want to be inquiring, asking how was your day, and interested. So maybe the word is interested. Maybe that might be a word that he knows. If he knows his wife, he'll know what she appreciates. The second word would be totally present, maybe. And then the next one might be sharing the load. Because if the wife is looking after children, let's say in that example, that he comes in and jumps into the family life and say, right, I'll do the dishes, I'll cook the food, I'll do something, whatever it might be. Or I'll help the kids with their homework. And so there might be 3 words, and you will show up very differently than the CEO who would have walked in the door and had the tension of thousands of people, let's say, in a company. And now I want you to think about your situation. Where do you have one transition in your life where you bring tension from one place and insert it into the next. It could be like this example of showing up for your partner. It could be maybe when you're going the other way, maybe you're going to work and you're just not with it at the start of the day because you've not shown up. Or maybe it doesn't matter what your transition is. Pick one transition where you know you would get incredible value out of transitioning. So what are the steps? Step 1, release. Just breathing in for about 30 seconds. Release. Thinking about the thing that's peeving you off, that's really got you going, and letting it go. Step 2, another 30 seconds. 3 aspirational words that are specific to where you're going next, whatever the next transition is. Showing up for your kids, showing up for your wife, showing up for your boss, showing up for someone, whoever it is. Generally, there's always a situation that's holding you back and a situation you're heading towards, so that you can show up and be present in every moment. It's a simple little technique, and this book shows you how to do it. So I really like it because it's a simple technique, and it's not like the core of the book, but gee, it really hit me between the eyes as something I'm using now every day as I show up. But first, I've got to release. So step 1 is release. Release what has just happened in your day. And step 2 is 3 aspirational words. 3 words of how you want to show up. I hope that helps. And I want you to message in the links below, if in the comments below, what are your 3 words that you're going to use to help you lift your energy, to show up, to present to the world in the next element of your day, the transition into perhaps home to the family life would be one example. Or maybe it might be from work to sport, or maybe it might be some other situation. You need to show up, something which excites you, something which would be valuable to you, where you're not getting the results you want, and you can use 3 words just to lift your state. I hope that helps. My name's Matthew Tate. This is Fork in the Road YouTube channel, your channel for transformation. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention before I leave that from the adoptee's perspective, I didn't give that perspective, that piece, and then the anxiety piece. So before I sign off, let me just finish with this. So for anxiety, if you let go of some of the anxiety from work, you will then transfer into the next situation. In that transition, by releasing that tension, you'll show up and be present. And when you're in the present moment, you don't have as much anxiety. And as long as you deal with what happened at work, you can show up at your family life. And so that's going to reduce your anxiety. Now, if you don't have a plan on how you're going to resolve that, well, once you've presented yourself to your family, you've shown up, you've been there for them, you can still go and write down in your journal and write down what your strategy is going to be to counter the tension at work, instead of just showing up into the tension again. And that way you can start to lasso it. There's a million techniques on all of those sorts of things. So from an anxiety point of view, it will reduce your anxiety because people are going to be appreciating you. On the other side of things, on the adoptee side of things, well, I think there's a lot to be said about releasing the thoughts and the tensions that happen for everyone in the adoption circle. And that, I think, is going to be a completely different video because it will go on for a while. And so if you can then think about how you're going to show up, and there's a lot of different scenarios in the adoption situation, but how do you want to show up? And who are you showing up for? Now, I know when people are approaching biological family, that's a big issue. And so if you're upset with someone, maybe if you show up first differently, if you're upset with biological family just being a bit half-baked with their communication with you, well, just show up differently. What would be 3 words that would help you get through that, where you show up a bit differently? where you don't show up perhaps as appearing needy. I know there's a lot of tension, that maybe there's a lot of needs that you need. Or maybe you need to show up for yourself. See, it's a really interesting technique because by releasing the tension of the last situation, and it might be the last time you saw your biological parents, you release the tension of that. I know you haven't resolved it yet, and we need to come up with a strategy and a battle plan for that. But then you think, how can I show up differently? And how can I show up with a different set of rules in my head for myself so I can be happy with this situation? There's a lot of applications for this, and it could go super deep. I hope that helps. I think there's probably a video on the anxiety and a video on the adoptee situation to help people with this, but I find it really useful. I'm using it all the time. When I'm not happy how I've shown up in a situation, the next time I encounter it, I release the last one and I set the intention. I'm going to show up as, I don't know, confident, proactive, and empowered. I don't know. I mean, it depends on, you need to aim it at the situation you're going into, like the CEO story in the book. My name's Matthew Tate. This is Fork in the Road YouTube channel. These are my personal takeaways from this book, High Performance Habits by Brendon Buchard. It's a lot more than just a high performance book. It's actually got some tips on how to move forward in life. This is Fork in the Road. Matthew Tate signing out.